What happens when the life you've carefully built is shattered in a spray of bullets and blood? When everyone who ever mattered to you is cut down before your eyes, leaving you alone in a world suddenly turned hostile? For 25-year-old Emma Thorne, surviving the Devil's Canyon massacre was only the beginning of her nightmare. Captured by ruthless bounty hunters who slaughtered her family, she found herself a prisoner in a den of killers, her fate hanging by the thinnest thread. But even in the darkest corners of human cruelty, unexpected heroes emerge from the shadows. This is the story of a woman who refused to be broken, a Lakota warrior seeking vengeance, and the blood-soaked path they carved toward freedom and justice. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma Thorne's hands had finally stopped shaking. 4 weeks had passed since the massacre at Devil's Canyon, but for the first time, her fingers remained steady as she mended a tear in her dress. The coarse fabric, once a cheerful blue, was now stained with memories she couldn't wash out. She worked by the dim light of a single oil lamp, the needle flashing silver as it dipped in and out of the cloth. The bounty hunter's cabin creaked around her, its rough-hewn logs offering little protection against the autumn wind that whispered through the cracks. Outside, the Montana night pressed close, stars scattered like salt across the vast darkness. So different from the city skies she'd known growing up in Baltimore. Heavy footsteps approached, and Emma tensed, setting aside her mending as the door swung open on protesting hinges. Clayton Reeves filled the doorway, his massive frame blocking the light from the main camp. At 45, he was still powerfully built, with a thick salt and pepper beard and eyes the color of dirty ice. The leader of the bounty hunters adjusted his gun belt as he regarded her. "Making yourself useful, I see," he said, his voice like gravel in a tin cup. "Good. Idle hands and all that." Emma said nothing, keeping her eyes downcast. The posture of submission she'd learned was safest. Inside, hatred burned like a banked fire, carefully hidden. This man had murdered her father, had watched as his men gunned down her mother and little brother, had dragged her, half dead with grief, to this remote camp high in the mountains where no law reached. Reeves stepped closer, forcing her to look up at him. "We're bringing in a bounty tomorrow. Territory's paying $500 for him, dead or alive." His mouth twisted in what might have been a smile on a different man. "Mostly dead, I expect." "What does that have to do with me?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Reeves chuckled, the sound devoid of warmth. "Just making conversation. 4 weeks in this camp, and still so unfriendly." He reached down, catching her chin between rough fingers. "You should be grateful, girl. Most folks who cross the Devil's Dozen don't live to regret it." Emma pulled away from his touch, a small defiance she couldn't suppress. "I didn't cross you. We were just passing through the canyon." "Wrong place, wrong time," Reeves agreed, seemingly untroubled by the memory of the massacre. "But then Parker recognized your pa from that wanted poster out of Kansas City. $5,000 bounties, nothing to sneeze at, even split 12. Ways." Emma's hands curled into fists in her lap. The bounty on her father had been based on lies, political revenge disguised as justice after he'd exposed corruption in the railroad company. Thomas Thorne had been taking his family west to start over, to farm the land and leave politics behind. "So why am I still alive?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. She'd overheard enough conversations between the bounty hunters to understand her precarious position. "Parker thought you might have some value," Reeves said, watching her reaction. "And I've got a buyer coming in a few days' time. Man in Virginia City who collects pretty things." Ice bloomed in Emma's veins. Human trafficking. The fate she'd been dreading since they dragged her to this camp. "I'm not a thing to be bought and sold," she said, lifting her chin despite the danger. "We all sell something, Miss Thorne," Reeves replied, his cold eyes assessing her like merchandise. Your father sold his principles to the highest bidder. Now you'll pay his debts. My father was an honest man, Emma countered, anger momentarily. Overwhelming caution. The only debt here is the one you'll pay someday for what you've done. Reeves's hand moved faster than she could follow, striking her across the face with enough force to snap her head to the side. Pain bloomed across her cheek, but she didn't cry out. Watch your tongue, girl, he warned, voice suddenly soft, which was somehow more frightening than if he'd shouted. My patience isn't unlimited. The door opened again, admitting a lean, whipcord tough man with a face that might have been handsome if not for the cruelty etched into every line. Jackson Parker, Reeves's second-in-command, and the man who'd recognized her father in Devil's Canyon. At 35, he was the youngest of the bounty hunters' inner circle, and by far the most dangerous. Problem? Parker asked, his Texas drawl at odds with the cold calculation in his eyes. He carried the scent of horses, tobacco, and gunpowder, an unholy trinity that now featured prominently in Emma's nightmares. Just explaining Miss Thorne's future to her, Reeves replied, stepping back. She's having trouble accepting her circumstances. Parker's gaze slid over Emma like a physical touch, making her skin crawl. She'll learn, he said with a certainty that chilled her. They all do eventually. Emma stared at the floor, fighting to keep her breathing steady. These men had taken everything from her, family, freedom, dignity, but she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear. Not again. Get some sleep, Reeves ordered her. Tomorrow you'll help Quinn with the supplies. That hand of yours has healed enough for real work. Without waiting for a response, the two men left, the door closing with ominous finality behind them. Only when their footsteps had faded did Emma release the breath she'd been holding, her hand rising to touch her stinging cheek. The cabin they kept her in was small, just a cot, a rough table, and a chair. No windows, just a single chimney for the small stove that barely kept the mountain chill at bay. The door was bolted from the outside at night. During the day, she was watched constantly, allowed only limited movement around the camp to perform whatever tasks they assigned her. Emma moved to the small, cracked mirror hanging on the wall, examining her reflection in the wavering lamplight. 4 weeks had transformed her. The well-educated daughter of a newspaper editor had disappeared, replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger with a fading bruise at her temple and a healing cut along her jawline. Souvenirs of the massacre. Her honey-blonde hair, once her pride, hung lank around her shoulders, haphazardly cut where it had been singed in the wagon fire. She pressed her palm against the glass, a useless attempt to reach through to that other Emma, the one who had played piano and read Emerson, who had planned to teach school once they reached Oregon. That Emma was gone, buried in a shallow grave alongside her family in Devil's Canyon. No, she whispered to her reflection. She's not gone. Not yet. Moving carefully, Emma knelt beside her cot, fingers searching for the loose floorboard she'd discovered 3 days earlier. Beneath it lay her meager treasures. A small knife stolen from the kitchen during her chores, a length of rope painstakingly unraveled from a fraying sack, and a crude map of the surrounding area she'd pieced together from overheard conversations. The chance of escape seemed impossibly small. The camp was isolated, perched high on a forested mountainside with sheer cliffs to the east and dense woods patrolled by Reeves' men in every other direction. Even if she managed to flee, where would she go? The nearest settlement was days away on foot through wilderness she barely understood. But the alternative, waiting to be sold to a stranger in Virginia City, was unthinkable. Emma returned her treasures to their hiding place, smoothing the floorboard back into position. Tomorrow she would continue watching, listening, planning. Somewhere in this brutal camp, an opportunity would present itself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. She had to be ready when it did. Sleep, when it came, was fitful and haunted by memories. Her father falling with 3 bullets in his chest, her mother's scream cut short by Parker's knife, her 12-year-old brother Daniel dragged from the wagon and executed when he tried to fight back, and Emma, caught beneath the burning wagon, watching through smoke and tears as her world ended in blood and fire. She woke before dawn, jerked from nightmare to waking by a sound she couldn't immediately identify. Different from the usual camp noises, men, snoring, horses stamping, the wind in the pines. This was something else, something deliberately quiet. Emma lay still, straining to hear. There, a soft whistle, so brief it might have been a bird, except no bird would call in the darkest hour before dawn. A response came from the opposite side of the camp, equally faint. Someone was out there. Someone who wasn't part of Reeves's Devil's Dozen. Heart pounding, Emma slipped from her cot and pressed her ear to the cabin door. Beyond, she could hear the soft crunch of boots on frost-stiffened ground, a whispered command. The sound of a sentry dying came next, a choked-off gurgle that might have been missed by anyone not listening as intently as she was. Alarm fluttered. In her chest. An attack? A rival bounty hunter gang, perhaps? Or bandits hoping to steal Reeves' considerable stockpile of weapons and bounty money? Whatever was happening, it spelled danger, but also opportunity. Emma moved quickly to retrieve her hidden supplies. The small knife felt inadequate in her palm, but it was better than nothing. She wrapped the rope around her waist beneath her dress, tucking the crude map into her bodice. A shot cracked the pre-dawn silence, followed immediately by shouts and more gunfire. The camp erupted into chaos, men yelling, horses screaming in panic, the thunder of running feet. Emma pressed herself against the wall beside the door, knife clutched in white-knuckled fingers. If someone came for her, she'd have one chance. One thrust of the blade. She'd been a doctor's daughter before her father turned to journalism. She knew where to strike to do the most damage. The gunfire intensified. Through the thin walls of the cabin, she could hear the distinctive crack of Reeves' men's rifles, but also another sound, the heavier boom of what might be buffalo guns, and something else that raised the hair on her neck. War cries that didn't belong to any white man. Native warriors here. The bounty hunters had spoken of Indian trouble to the north, but Reeves had dismissed it as nothing to worry about, just a few hostiles being pursued by the cavalry after raiding a settlement. The door to her cabin burst open. Emma lunged. Forward, knife raised only to freeze as she registered who stood in the doorway. Not Reeves or Parker or any of the Devil's Dozen, but a figure she'd never seen before, a tall, powerfully built man silhouetted against the chaos outside. Even in the dim light, she could see he was Native American, his long black hair in braids adorned with feathers, his face marked with red and black paint that accentuated sharp cheekbones and intense dark eyes. He wore buckskin leggings and a breastplate of bone and beads over his bare chest, despite the autumn chill. A rifle was gripped in one hand, a knife in the other, both bloodied. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other in mutual shock. Emma with her pathetic blade raised, the warrior with weapons that had already tasted blood that morning. "Who are you?" Emma managed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The warrior's eyes narrowed slightly, taking in her battered appearance, the knife in her trembling hand, the healing wounds on her face. When he spoke, his deep voice carried the slight accent of someone for whom English was not a first language. "Apache," he replied, then added, as if it explained everything, "Lakota." Before Emma could respond, a bullet splintered the doorframe inches from the warrior's head. He ducked inside, pushing her down as more shots followed. Outside, the battle raged on, the Devil's Dozen fighting back against unseen attackers. "Come," Apache said, gripping her arm. "No safe here." "Wait," Emma pulled back. Despite everything, she hesitated to flee with this stranger into the unknown. Why are you here? Why attack this camp? These men took something that belongs to my people, the warrior replied, his expression hardening. And to me, a sacred thing. He glanced at her knife, then back to her face. You prisoner? Emma nodded, decision crystallizing with sudden clarity. Whatever this man's purpose, it aligned with hers in one crucial aspect, bringing down Reeves and his bounty hunters, the devil she knew versus the one she didn't. Yes, she said, they killed my family. They were going to sell me in Virginia City. Something shifted in Akacheta's expression, recognition perhaps, or anger on her behalf. He extended his hand. Then we go. Now. This time, Emma didn't hesitate. She placed her small knife in her pocket and took the warrior's hand, allowing him to lead her into the chaos of what had become a killing ground. The Devil's Dozen camp was engulfed in violence. Bodies lay scattered across the frost-covered ground, blood steaming in the cold air. 2 cabins were ablaze, the flames casting hellish light over the scene. Through the smoke and pre-dawn gloom, Emma caught glimpses of other warriors, at least 10, moving with deadly purpose between buildings. And cover, Akacheta pulled her low, using structures for protection as they made their way toward the tree line. Twice they encountered bounty hunters trying to flee. Twice the Lakota warrior dispatched them with brutal efficiency, never slowing his pace or loosening his grip on Emma's hand. They had almost reached the relative safety of the forest when a familiar voice called out behind them, "Going somewhere, Miss Thorne?" Emma froze at the sound of Jackson Parker's voice. The bounty hunter stood 20 yards away, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead, a revolver aimed steadily at them. Behind him, the camp continued to burn, but the sounds of fighting had diminished. Either the battle was ending or moving deeper into the forest. Akacheta pushed Emma behind him in one fluid motion, his rifle coming up. Parker's thin lips curved into a smile. "I wouldn't if I were you, savage. This Remington's got a hair trigger, and I never miss at this distance." He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the blood-stained ground. "Drop your weapons, and maybe I'll just kill you instead of taking my time about it." Emma felt rather than saw Akacheta tense, calculating odds, distances, the time it would take to raise his rifle against Parker's already aimed revolver. The bounty hunter had the advantage, and they all knew it. "Your men are dead or scattered," Akacheta said, his deep voice carrying across the space between them. "You have lost this fight," Parker's face hardened. "Not from where I'm standing." His cold eyes shifted to Emma. "Was this your plan all along, girl? Conspiring with these heathens?" "I never met him before today," Emma replied, edging sideways, slightly putting distance between herself and Akacheta, not to abandon him, but to divide Parker's attention. "But I'd take his company over yours any day." "Ungrateful bitch," Parker snarled, his careful composure slipping. "After we fed you, clothed you, after you murdered my family," Emma cut in, her voice strengthening with each word. "After you kept me prisoner, beat me, threatened to sell me like cattle." Something moved in the trees behind Parker, a shadow detaching itself from deeper shadows. Emma kept her gaze fixed on the bounty hunter, careful not to betray the approaching figure. "Your father was a wanted man," Parker said, adjusting his grip on the revolver. "We were just doing our job. Your job." Emma's laugh held no humor. "You're not lawmen. You're murderers with pieces of paper to justify your bloodlust." Parker's face contorted with rage. "Enough talking. Both of you on your knees, now." "I do not kneel to men like you," Akacheta stated, his stance unwavering. The shadow behind Parker solidified into another Lakota warrior, younger than Akacheta, but moving with the same lethal grace. He held a knife in one hand, advancing in perfect silence. Then you'll die on your feet, Parker replied, finger tightening on the trigger. Three things happened simultaneously. Akacheta launched himself sideways, pulling Emma with him. The young warrior lunged at Parker from behind, and a shot cracked through the dawn air. Emma hit the ground hard, pain shooting through her shoulder. Akacheta rolled to his feet beside her, rifle raised, but there was no need. The young Lakota stood over Parker's body, retrieving his knife from the bounty hunter's back. The bullet had gone wide, embedding itself in a tree trunk yards away. "Wanbli." Akacheta acknowledged the younger warrior with a nod of thanks. Wanbli, barely more than a boy, Emma realized, perhaps 17 or 18, grinned fiercely through his war paint. He said something in Lakota, gesturing toward Emma with a questioning look. "Prisoner," Akacheta replied in English, presumably for her benefit. "They killed her family too." The young warrior's expression softened slightly, recognition of shared suffering passing between them. He offered Emma a hand, helping her to her feet with surprising gentleness. "We go now," Akacheta said, scanning the tree line. "More bounty hunters will come soon. They travel in packs, like wolves." Emma glanced back at the burning camp. Most of her immediate tormentors lay dead, but the face she most wanted to see among them was missing. "Reeves?" she asked. "The leader?" Akacheta shook his head. "Escaped. 3 men with him." A cold knot formed in Emma's stomach. Clayton Reeves was not a man to accept defeat. He would regroup, gather reinforcements, and hunt down those who had destroyed his camp and killed his men. "He'll come after us," she said with certainty. "Yes," Akacheta agreed, "but first we must go." He gestured toward the dense forest that climbed the mountainside. "Our horses wait 2 miles north." Before Emma could respond, more Lakota warriors materialized from the trees and burning cabins. 8 in total, some wounded, but all still moving under their own power. They carried weapons and small bundles that Emma assumed contained whatever they'd come to reclaim. One warrior, distinguished by a headdress of eagle feathers, approached Akacheta. They spoke rapidly in Lakota, the older man's expression growing increasingly stern as his gaze kept returning to Emma. She didn't need to understand their language to recognize an argument about her presence. The older warrior clearly objected, gesturing emphatically back toward the camp, then to Emma, his tone growing heated. Akacheta responded calmly but firmly, his posture subtly shifting to place himself between Emma and the other warrior. Whatever he said seemed to end the immediate dispute, though the elder man shot Emma a final suspicious glance before turning away to organize the others. "Problem?" Emma asked quietly, when Akacheta returned to her side. "Chief White Bear thinks you bring danger," he explained, studying her face. "Says bounty hunters will follow because of you. Says we should leave you." Emma's heart sank. As much as she hated to admit it, the chief's assessment wasn't wrong. Reeves would hunt her with particular vengeance, not just for her escape, but because she'd witnessed the massacre of her family. She was a living testimony to murder that even the territorial courts might take seriously. "And what do you say?" she asked, meeting Akacheta's dark eyes. "I say we do not abandon those who suffer at hands of men like Reeves," he replied. "Come, we must move quickly." The Lakota band melted into the forest with practiced silence, Akacheta keeping Emma close beside him. Despite her city upbringing, she matched their pace, driven by fear of recapture and the desperate need to put distance between herself and the smoldering ruins of the bounty hunter's camp. They traveled steadily upward through dense pine forest, the air growing thinner as they climbed. Emma's lungs burned, her legs protesting after weeks of limited movement in captivity, but she refused to slow their progress. Freedom, however tenuous, fueled her steps. After nearly 2 hours of climbing, they reached a well-hidden clearing. where 12 horses waited, tethered in a natural corral formed by a semicircle of boulders. The animals were magnificent, primarily paint horses with distinctive patterned coats, their lean bodies speaking of both speed and endurance. Apache led Emma to a sturdy buckskin mare. "You ride?" he asked, adjusting the simple blanket that served as a saddle. "Yes," Emma replied, grateful for the childhood lessons her father had insisted upon despite her mother's concerns about unladylike pursuits. "Though it's been some time." The ghost of a smile touched Apache's lips. "Like swimming, a body remembers." He cupped his hands to give her a boost up. Once mounted, Emma felt a strange sense of rightness despite her circumstances. The mare was responsive and calm beneath her, turning easily with the slightest pressure of knees or shift of weight. Around, the warriors mounted their own horses, the chief taking the lead position. Apache swung onto a striking black stallion with a white blaze down its face, moving alongside Emma as the band began to ride. Their path took them higher into the mountains, following game trails too narrow for wagons and seldom used by white travelers. They rode in silence for nearly an hour before Emma gathered the courage to ask the question that had been growing. In her mind since the attack, "What did they take from you?" she asked quietly. "Reeves and his men. You said they took something sacred." Apache was silent for so long that Emma thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, meant for her ears alone. "My sister's bones." His expression remained stoic, but Emma saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. "Our burial sites are sacred. 6 days ago, bounty hunters dug up graves near our winter camp, looking for valuables buried with our dead. They took my sister's remains and the medicine bundle buried with her." Horror and disgust washed through Emma. The desecration of graves was a special kind of depravity, violating not just the dead, but the living who mourned them. "I'm sorry," she said, the words inadequate but sincere. "We tracked them," Apache continued, "found their camp, watched for 2 days before attacking." He glanced at her. "Saw you, knew you were not there by choice." Emma realized then that her rescue had been incidental, not the purpose of the raid, but a byproduct of it. She wasn't sure if that made her more or less grateful to the warrior. Riding beside her, "Did you find what you came for?" she asked. "Your sister's remains?" Apache nodded toward one of the warriors who carried a small bundle wrapped in decorated hide. "Yes, tonight we perform ceremony to cleanse her spirit from their touch. Tomorrow we return her to the earth." The group halted in late afternoon as dark clouds gathered over the mountains, promising an early winter storm. They made camp in a sheltered ravine, the natural walls providing protection from the wind that had begun to gust through the pines. Emma sat apart from the others, watching as they efficiently established camp, building small, nearly smokeless fires, erecting simple shelters, tending to the horses. The familiarity of their movements spoke of a lifetime spent in harmony with this harsh but beautiful environment. Chief White Bear continued to regard her with suspicion, speaking sharply to Apache when the younger warrior brought her a share of their dried meat and a water skin. Emma ate gratefully, the simple fare far better than the scraps she'd been given in the bounty hunters' camp. As twilight descended, bringing the first fat snowflakes spinning down from the leaden sky, Apache approached her again, carrying a folded bundle of hides. "Storm comes," he said, handing her the furs. "These will keep you warm." "Thank you," Emma replied, wrapping the surprisingly soft hides around her shoulders. Their warmth was immediate and welcome against the biting mountain cold. "Your chief doesn't want me here." It wasn't a question, but Apache answered anyway. "A White Bear is cautious. Many promises from white people have turned to lies." He settled beside her, his gaze on the darkening sky. "You bring complication." "Because Reeves will come after me," Emma said. "Yes, and because our people are at war with yours," he replied matter-of-factly. Taking you to our winter camp is risk." Emma stared into the small fire, watching the flames dance. "I have nowhere else to go. My family is dead. I don't even know if anyone in the east knows what happened to us." Akecheta was silent for a moment, the firelight casting shadows across his strong features. Without his war paint, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "What will you do?" he asked. "If you survive?" The question caught her off guard. In the desperate weeks since the massacre, survival itself had been her only goal. The future beyond escape had seemed an impossible luxury. "Find justice for my family," she said finally. "Make sure Reeves and any of his men who survived answer for what they did." "Justice," Akecheta repeated, testing the word as if its taste was unfamiliar. "White man's law does not often extend to people like us. People like us. Those who exist in shadows of your world. Indians, former slaves, women alone." His gaze met hers directly. "We are invisible until we become inconvenient." The truth of his words struck Emma with painful clarity. As a woman alone in the Western Territories, her word would carry little weight against established men like Reeves, who undoubtedly had connections with local authorities. And Akecheta's people faced even greater prejudice and dismissal. Before she could respond, a sharp cry came from the edge of camp. One of the younger warriors pointed toward the valley below, where a distant pinprick of light had appeared in the gathering darkness. White Bear barked commands, and immediately the camp mobilized, fires doused, shelters collapsed, supplies gathered. Akecheta rose to his feet, pulling Emma up beside him. "Torches," he explained grimly. "Bounty hunters, moving faster than expected." Emma's blood ran cold. "How did they find us so quickly?" "Tracker," Akecheta replied, already leading her toward the horses. "Reeves has Crow Scout with him. Very skilled." The snow was falling more heavily now, which Emma thought might slow their pursuers, but Akecheta shook his head when she suggested it. "Snow hides tracks, yes, but also forces us to hire. Ground where paths are few," he explained as they mounted, "makes our route predictable." The Lakota band rode out into the snowstorm, leaving their temporary camp as pristine as they'd found it. They climbed higher, the horses picking their way carefully along narrow trails that skirted dizzying drops into darkness. The snow swirled around them, reducing visibility to mere yards and numbing exposed skin. Emma clung to her horse's mane, trusting the sure-footed mare to follow Akecheta's stallion. The cold penetrated even the fur hides she wore, seeping into her bones. Despite this, fear kept her alert, her eyes straining to pierce the curtain of white that surrounded them. They rode for what seemed like hours, though time became difficult, to track in the monotony of swirling snow and dark silhouettes. Occasionally, when the wind shifted, Emma thought she heard voices carried up from below, their pursuers closing the distance despite the storm. Akecheta pulled his horse alongside hers as they reached a relatively flat stretch of trail. "You holding on?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Emma nodded, too cold for words. Her fingers had lost feeling, and her face felt frozen into immobility. "Not much further," he assured her. "Cave system ahead, safe place to weather storm and plan next move." The promise of shelter gave Emma renewed strength. She straightened in her makeshift saddle, peering ahead through the thickening snowfall. That's when the shot came, a sharp crack that echoed off the mountainside, followed by a startled cry from the rear of their group. Emma turned to see one of the warriors slump forward on his horse, clutching his shoulder where a bullet had found its mark. "Ride," Akecheta commanded, urging his stallion forward. "Now!" Emma didn't need to be told twice. She pressed her knees into her mare's sides, and the horse leapt forward, following the others at a dangerous pace, considering the treacherous terrain. Behind them, more shots rang out, ricocheting off rocks or disappearing into the void beyond. The trail's edge. A bullet whizzed past Emma's ear, so close she felt its passage like a whisper. Another struck a pine tree as they rounded a bend, sending splinters flying. The trail widened as they approached a rocky plateau. Ahead, a dark opening yawned in the mountainside, the cave Apache had promised. Safety seemed within reach. Then disaster struck. Emma's mare stepped on a patch of ice hidden beneath the fresh snow. The horse's legs went out from under her, sending Emma flying from her back. She hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs, and rolled dangerously close to the cliff edge before coming to a stop against a boulder. Pain lanced through her leg, not broken, she thought, but badly twisted. She struggled to rise as her mare regained its footing and bolted toward the other horses. "Apache!" she called, her voice thin in the howling wind. He was already turning back, having seen her fall. Despite the bullets still searching for targets, he rode toward her, leaning low over his stallion's neck. Behind him, the rest of the band had reached the cave entrance. White Bear shouted something, gesturing urgently, but Apache ignored him. Focused entirely on reaching Emma, a volley of shots erupted from the trail below. Through the swirling snow, Emma caught glimpses of the pursuers. At least 6 men, Reeves' unmistakable bulk at their lead, rifles raised. Apache reached her, extending his arm. With a surge of desperate strength, Emma grasped it, allowing him to pull her up behind him on the stallion's back. The horse reared at the additional weight, then leapt forward toward the cave. They were halfway across the plateau when a bullet found its mark. Apache grunted, his body jerking as lead tore through his side. Emma felt warm blood splash against her hand where it gripped his waist, but the warrior didn't falter, didn't slow. "Hold tight," he gritted out, spurring the stallion to greater speed. They reached the cave entrance as another fusillade of bullets kicked up snow around them. Inside, darkness enveloped them, the sudden absence of wind and snow almost disorienting after the chaotic flight. The other warriors had withdrawn deeper into the cave system, taking the horses with them through passages that twisted away from the entrance. Apache slid from the stallion's back, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. Emma dismounted awkwardly, her injured leg threatening to buckle beneath her. "You're hit," she said, reaching toward his wound. "Not deep," he replied, though the tightness around his eyes belied his words. "Come. Must go deeper before they reach cave. They'll follow us." "In?" "Reeves is determined, Hunter," Apache said grimly. "He will not stop until he has what he wants." As if to confirm his words, a voice echoed from outside, barely audible over the storm, but chilling in its calm certainty. "We know you're in there." "Miss Thorne," Clayton Reeves called, "this doesn't need to get any messier than it already is. Come out now, and maybe your savage friends get to live." Emma exchanged a glance with Apache, both knowing the promise was empty. Reeves had no intention of leaving witnesses, regardless of her actions. "What do we do?" she whispered. Before Apache could answer, the distinctive click of a revolver being cocked echoed in the cave. Emma turned slowly to find White Bear emerging from a side passage, rifle aimed steadily at her chest, his weathered face set in lines of grim determination. The chief spoke a single word. "That enough." White Bear's voice echoed in the cave, the rifle in his hands unwavering as he aimed at Emma. Behind them, Reeves's men were approaching the cave entrance, their voices carrying over the howling wind. Apache stepped between Emma and the chief's rifle. Blood seeped through his fingers where he pressed them against his wounded side, but his stance was steady, his voice calm as he addressed White Bear in Lakota. Emma couldn't understand their words, but the tension between them was palpable. Two strong wills clashing in the shadowy confines of the mountain cave. The older man's face remained impassive, though his eyes burned with intensity as he responded, gesturing sharply toward the cave entrance where their pursuers gathered. "What's happening?" Emma whispered, wincing as she shifted her weight off. "Her injured leg. He says we risk everything for an outsider." Akacheta translated grimly. "Says we should give you to Reeves. Buy time for our escape." Cold fear washed through her. After everything, to be handed back to the bounty hunters like a peace offering seemed a cruelty beyond bearing. "And you?" she asked, already knowing the answer from the way he positioned himself as her shield. "I say we do not become like those. We fight against." Akacheta didn't take his eyes from Whitebear as he spoke. "To sacrifice innocent for convenience makes us no better than Reeves." The standoff stretched, measured in heartbeats and labored breaths. Outside, the voices grew. Closer. Time was running out. It was Wan Blee, the young warrior who had saved them from Parker, who broke the impasse. He stepped from the shadows of a side passage, moving to stand beside Akacheta. Though he kept his eyes downcast in respect, his message was clear. He stood with the wounded warrior, not the chief. One by one, 3 more warriors joined them, forming a protective semicircle around Emma. Only 2 remained with Whitebear, uncertainty evident in their postures. The chief's weathered face betrayed nothing, but Emma sensed the calculation behind his eyes, weighing loyalty, tradition, survival. Finally, with a sound of disgust, he lowered his rifle. "Your choice brings death to us all," he said in accented English, fixing Akacheta with a hard stare. "On your head be it." Before anyone could respond, a voice called from just outside the cave entrance. "Last chance, Miss Thorne," Reeves shouted. "Over the storm. Come out now, or we start shooting blind into that cave. Lots of echoes in there, bound to hit something eventually." Whitebear spat on the cave floor, then gestured sharply toward a dark passage that twisted deeper into the mountain. "Go," he ordered. "We hold them here." Akacheta hesitated, clearly torn between staying to fight and ensuring Emma's safety. "Trust me this once," Whitebear said, his voice softening slightly. "Old Wolf still has teeth." After a moment, Akacheta nodded, clasping the older man's forearm in a warrior's grip. "May your aim be true, father of my father." The relationship suddenly clicked into place for Emma, not just chief and warrior, but grandfather and grandson. The family connection explained both the conflict and the underlying respect that had prevented it from erupting into something worse. "Take her to the sacred pools," Whitebear instructed, already turning toward the cave entrance, rifle raised. "Spirits will decide her fate there." Wan Blee and another warrior took up positions with Whitebear, while the others gathered the horses, preparing to move deeper into the cave system. Akacheta took Emma's arm, supporting her as they followed a narrow tunnel that sloped downward. "Into the mountain's heart. Can they hold Reeves off?" Emma asked, glancing back toward the distant glow of torchlight at the cave entrance. "For a time," Akacheta replied. "These caves have many chambers, many passages, easy to defend, hard to attack." He guided her around a sharp corner where the path narrowed further. "But we must hurry. Your leg, how bad?" "I can walk," Emma assured him, though each step sent pain shooting up her calf. "What about you? You're still bleeding." In the dim light of the warrior's torch, she could see fresh blood seeping through his makeshift bandage. The bullet had torn a furrow along his ribs, not immediately life-threatening, but serious enough to require attention soon. "I have known worse," Akacheta said, his stoic expression betraying only the slightest hint of discomfort. "The sacred pools will help. Heal us both if we reach them." Behind them, gunfire erupted near the cave entrance, the opening volleys of what promised to be a desperate defense. Emma pushed aside her pain, forcing herself to move faster despite her injured leg. Each step took them further from Reeves, but also from the warriors who had stayed behind to buy their escape. The passage continued downward, sometimes so steeply that they had to half-slide down smooth rock faces, other times leveling out into chambers filled with fantastic limestone formations. The air grew warmer and heavy with moisture, a marked contrast to the winter storm raging outside. After what seemed like hours, but might have been less, they reached a vast underground chamber where the other warriors had gathered with the horses. A subterranean stream cut through the cavern floor, the water gleaming silver in the torchlight. "Rest here," Apache instructed, helping Emma settle on a relatively flat boulder. "Eat, drink. We continue soon." One of the warriors brought her dried meat and a water skin, then moved to help tend Apache's wound. Emma watched as they cleaned the bullet furrow with practiced efficiency, applying a poultice of herbs from a small medicine pouch before binding it with strips of clean cloth. No one spoke of White Bear and the others left behind. The weight of their sacrifice hung heavy in the air, an unacknowledged presence that shaped every movement, every decision. Emma knew she was partly responsible for the division among the band, for the danger they now faced. The knowledge sat like a stone. In her chest, when they moved on, it was with greater urgency. The distant sound of gunfire had ceased, leaving only silence in its wake, a silence that could mean either victory or defeat for those who had stayed behind. The passage they followed now ran alongside the underground stream, which gradually widened until it filled most of the tunnel. The air grew even warmer, tinged with an unfamiliar mineral scent. Occasionally, Emma caught glimpses of pale fish darting in the clear water, blind creatures adapted to eternal darkness. "How much further?" she asked, fatigue beginning to shadow her thoughts. The day's events, the escape, the desperate ride through the storm, the confrontation with White Bear, had drained her already depleted reserves. "Not far now," Apache replied, his own exhaustion evident in the set of his shoulders. "Hear that?" Emma listened. Beyond the soft splash of their footsteps, a new sound reached her ears, a low, rhythmic rumble that vibrated through the stone beneath their feet. "What is it?" "The falls," he said, a hint of reverence entering his voice. "Gateway to the sacred pools." The tunnel widened suddenly, opening into a cathedral-like space so vast that their torches couldn't illuminate its ceiling. The underground river plunged over a 30-foot drop, creating the waterfall they had heard. The cascade fed into a series of interconnected pools that steamed gently in the cool air, their surfaces reflecting the torchlight like molten metal. "Hot springs," Emma realized, inhaling the mineral-rich steam that hung over the water. Apache nodded. "Sacred to my people for many generations. Healing waters blessed by spirits." He gestured to the far side of the cavern. "There are smaller chambers beyond. We make camp there." The horses were led to a natural corral where fresh water trickled down the rock walls, collecting in a shallow basin. The warriors efficiently established a temporary camp in the smaller chambers Apache had indicated, laying out sleeping furs and building small fires where natural chimneys in the rock carried the smoke upward. Emma found herself assigned a small alcove partially separated from the main chamber by a curtain of stalactites. One of the warriors, a quiet man with grey streaks in his braided hair, brought her fresh bandages for her injured leg and a steaming cup of herbal tea. "Thank you," she said, accepting both gratefully. "What's your name?" The warrior studied her for a moment before answering. "Stone Walker," he replied in careful English. "I am healer for our band." He indicated her leg with a questioning gesture, and Emma nodded permission for him to examine it. His touch was gentle as he probed the swelling around her ankle and calf. "Not broken," he confirmed. "Bad twist. Water will help." He pointed toward the nearest of the steaming pools. "Soak when you are ready. Spirits in water will ease pain." After he left, Emma sipped the bitter tea, feeling its warmth spread through her chilled body. The events of the day replayed in her mind. Parker's death, the desperate escape through the snowstorm, White Bear's rifle aimed at her chest, Apache stepping between them without hesitation. She had exchanged one dangerous situation for another, yet somehow felt more hope than she had since the massacre at Devil's Canyon. These men, strangers whose language she didn't speak, whose ways were foreign to her, had risked their lives for her. Not all of them willingly, perhaps, but they had done it nonetheless. When she felt strong enough, Emma made her way to the edge of the nearest pool. Steam rose from the surface of the water, which glowed with an otherworldly blue-green light from minerals dissolved within it. The warmth beckoned to her aching body. Glancing around to ensure privacy, she removed her tattered dress, leaving only her undergarments before slipping into the water. The heat was almost shocking at first, but as she eased deeper, the tension in her muscles began to release. Her injured leg throbbed initially, then gradually numbed as the mineral-rich water worked its magic. Emma closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of pure relief. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't cold, wasn't hungry, wasn't in immediate danger. It was a precarious peace, she knew. Reeves was still pursuing them. White Bear and the others might be dead already, and she remained an outsider among people who had every reason to distrust her kind. But for this moment, in this hidden place beneath the mountain, she could breathe. The waters heal body and spirit, Akacheta's voice came softly from behind her, but they also show truth to those willing to see. Emma turned, instinctively sinking deeper into the pool to preserve her modesty. The Lakota warrior sat on a flat stone several feet away, respectfully averting his eyes from her state of undress. His wound had been properly treated now, fresh bandages visible beneath the open front of his buckskin shirt. "What truth?" she asked. Akacheta gestured to the glowing water. "These pools connect to spirit world. Our shamans say they are doorway between realms." His expression grew solemn. "Many visions have come to warriors who pray here. Do you believe that?" "I have seen enough to keep an open mind," he replied, a hint of humor touching his eyes. "White man's world values only what can be touched, measured. My people know there are forces beyond what eyes can see." Emma considered this. Her father, for all his progressiveness in politics, had been firmly grounded in rational thought. Yet she remembered her mother's quiet faith, the prayers she whispered each night, even as they traveled west in pursuit of Thomas Thorne's secular dreams. "My parents would have disagreed on that," she said, finding comfort in sharing even this small memory of them. "My father believed in what he could prove. My mother believed in what she could feel. And you?" The question hung between them, unexpectedly, personal yet somehow natural in this otherworldly setting. "I don't know anymore," Emma admitted. "Everything I thought I knew about the world changed the day your people believe in justice after death, that those who do evil face consequences beyond this life." Akacheta was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. "We believe all actions create ripples, like stone thrown in water. Good or evil, they return to their source eventually." He met her eyes. "But we do not wait for spirits to deliver justice when our own hands can do so." The implied promise in his words sent a shiver through Emma that had nothing to do with the water's temperature. "You mean to kill Reeves?" "If necessary," he replied simply. "He has taken much from both of us." "From you?" Akacheta hesitated, then rolled up his sleeve to reveal a distinctive scar on his forearm, a brand in the shape of a circle bisected by a line. "5 winters ago, Reeves and his men raided our hunting camp while warriors were away. They took 6 of our women and children." His voice remained steady, but Emma saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. "My wife among them. Understanding bloomed like blood in water. The bounty hunting is a cover," she said softly. "They're slavers. Yes, they sell to mines in Colorado, to houses of sin in frontier towns, to wealthy men in the East who want exotic servants." Disgust and old rage colored his words. "I tracked them for many miles, but alone I could not free the captives." "What happened?" "I tried anyway. got close enough to see my wife." His hand unconsciously touched the scar again. "Reeves caught me. This mark is his sign. Claims ownership of those he takes." The firelight caught the glint of something dangerous in his eyes. "I escaped before they could sell me. My wife did not." Emma felt sick. The horror of her family's murder, her own captivity, these were not isolated incidents but part of a pattern, a business built on human misery. "I'm sorry," she said, the words wholly inadequate. Akacheta acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. "Now you understand why White Bear fears your presence. Reeves has taken from us before. We have sworn blood vengeance against him." "And I complicate things," Emma finished. "Yes, but also you may be key to ending his evil." Akacheta leaned forward slightly. "You were not taken for slave markets, were you? Reeves kept you at his camp, where he rarely keeps captives. He said a buyer was coming for me specifically, someone in Virginia City." Emma frowned, but it seemed different from how he spoke of other merchandise, more personal. "Because you are witness to murder of prominent man," Akacheta suggested. "Your father, was he known beyond your family?" "He was a newspaper editor in Baltimore," Emma explained. "He exposed corruption in the railroad companies, made powerful enemies. That's why we were heading west, to start over." A new thought struck her. The bounty on him was suspiciously large. $5,000, when most wanted posters offer a few hundred at most. "Blood money," Akacheta said grimly. "Payment for assassination disguised as legal bounty." The pieces aligned, with terrible clarity. "My father was murdered by design, not chance. We weren't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And you were kept alive for purpose," Akacheta added, "perhaps to confirm the kill to whoever paid for it, perhaps as prize for the killer. Either way, you know too much about both the murder and Reeves's other activities." Emma pushed wet hair back from her face, mind racing. "If we could reach a federal marshal, provide evidence of what Reeves has done, not just to my family but to all his victims." "Law does not often favor my people," Akacheta interrupted, skepticism evident in his tone. "Word of Lakota warrior against white man holds little weight in white courts. But my word might," Emma countered. "Combined with evidence of slave trading, grave desecration, murder for hire, it could be enough to bring Reeves to justice." Her voice strengthened with conviction. Not just frontier justice, but the kind that prevents men like him from operating with impunity. Akacheta studied her, something like respect kindling in his dark eyes. "You have warrior spirit, Emma Thorne." The use of her given name startled her, the first time he had addressed her so personally. Before she could respond, a movement at the cavern entrance caught their attention. Wamblai appeared, his young face grave as he approached. He spoke rapidly to Akacheta in Lakota, gesturing back toward the tunnel they had traversed earlier. Emma didn't need a translation to understand the message. Their pursuers had breached the cave system's defenses. "White Bear?" she asked when Wamblai had finished his report. "Alive," Akacheta replied, relief evident beneath his stoic expression. "But wounded. They retreat to us now, with Reeves close." "Behind." Emma rose from the pool, keeping her body submerged. "I need to dress. We need to move." Akacheta shook his head. "No more running. Sacred pools protected by narrow passages. Easy to defend." His expression hardened with determination. "Here we make our stand." As if to punctuate his words, a distant gunshot echoed through the tunnels, followed by the unmistakable voice of Clayton Reeves. "We're coming for you, savages. And for you, Miss Thorne, nowhere left to hide." The echoes of Reeves's voice hung in the air like a toxic mist, promising violence to come. Emma hastily dressed behind a natural screen of stalactites, the wet fabric clinging uncomfortably to her skin. The brief respite in the healing waters had eased her physical pain, but fear had returned, sharp as a blade between her ribs. Akacheta organized the remaining warriors with quiet efficiency, positioning them at strategic points where the tunnel narrowed before opening into the vast chamber of the sacred pools. Stonewalker helped Emma bind her injured leg more securely, then pressed a knife into her hands, a steel blade with a bone handle, far superior to the makeshift weapon she'd fashioned in captivity. "You may need," the healer said simply, before moving to prepare poultices for the wounded who would soon arrive. The knife felt strange in Emma's grasp, unfamiliar yet somehow right, as if her hand had been waiting for this particular weight. She tucked it into her belt and moved toward the tunnel entrance, where Akacheta stood watch. "How many men with Reeves?" she asked, straining to hear the approaching conflict. "6, perhaps 7, he replied, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "They lost men at camp, more at cave entrance, but those who remain are dangerous, his most loyal killers." Emma thought of the devil's dozen she'd come to know during her captivity. After Parker, the most vicious had been Quinn, a former cavalry scout with dead eyes and a talent for tracking, Mercer, whose massive frame belied his speed with a blade, and Davis, a sharpshooter who'd boasted of notching his rifle stock for each man he killed. "If White Bear and the others make it here, what are our chances?" she asked. Akacheta's expression remained unreadable. "We are outnumbered. They have more firearms." He gestured to the narrow passage. "But they must come through. Here, 2 at most side by side. We hold advantage of position." Before Emma could respond, shadows appeared at the far end of the tunnel. 3 warriors emerged, half carrying White Bear between them. The chief's leg was bloodied, a crude tourniquet stemming what must have been significant bleeding. His weathered face was drawn with pain, but his eyes remained alert, scanning the chamber as he was brought to Stonewalker for treatment. One Blee and the other young warrior, 2 birds, brought up the rear, rifles at the ready as they backed toward the chamber. They exchanged rapid words with Akacheta, their expressions grim. "Reeves close?" Emma asked as they joined her. 2 birds nodded curtly. "Half a mile, maybe less. They wounded Night Runner. Had to leave him." His English was less practiced than Akacheta's, but serviceable. "Reeves has Crow Scout, Davis with long rifle, 4 others. The composition of their enemies confirmed Emma's fears. Davis, with his sharpshooting skills, would be particularly dangerous in the confined space of the caves." "How much ammunition do we have?" she asked. "Not enough," Akacheta replied bluntly. He studied her face for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "You should go deeper into caves. There are passages that lead to other valleys. Stonewalker can guide you." Emma stiffened. "You want me to run while you stay and fight? You are not warrior," he pointed out, "and your testimony may be only justice my people ever see for Reeves' crimes. If we fall, you must survive to speak truth." The logic was sound, but something in Emma rebelled against the idea of fleeing while others died in her defense. She had spent weeks as a helpless victim, her fate determined by the whims of brutal men. Now faced with another moment where her life hung in the balance, she found she could not, would not, relinquish agency again. "No," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "I won't leave." Akacheta's brow furrowed. "This is not time. For pride." "It's not pride," Emma interrupted. "It's choice. My choice." She drew the knife Stonewalker had given her. "I may not be a warrior by birth or training, but I can fight for my own life, for justice for my family. I won't run anymore." "Oh!" Flicker of respect passed across Akacheta's face, quickly masked by practical concern. "Knife will do little against rifles." "Then give me something better," Emma challenged. "Teach me how to help. There must be something I can do besides hide and hope." Before he could respond, White Bear's voice cut through their conversation. The chief had been propped against a boulder, his wounded leg stretched before him as Stonewalker applied a poultice. "The woman stays," he said, his voice rough with pain but firm with authority. She has earned right to choose her fate." Akacheta looked surprised at his grandfather's intervention, but nodded in acceptance. "As you say." He turned back to Emma. "Can you shoot?" "My father taught me," she replied, "though I'm no expert." Two birds handed her a revolver. A Colt, she noted, likely taken from a fallen bounty hunter. She checked the cylinder automatically, finding 5 bullets remaining. The familiar weight of the weapon steadied her somehow, connecting her to her father's memory. Thomas Thorne had insisted his daughter know how to defend herself in a world that offered women few protections. "Save bullets until clear shot," Akacheta advised. "We have surprise on our side. They do not know how many of us remain, or that we have reached sacred pools." As the small band prepared their defense, Emma was struck by the calm efficiency with which they worked. Despite the desperate situation, despite wounds and exhaustion, they moved with purpose. Their communication often consisted of nothing more than nods or hand signals, the understanding of men who had fought together before. White Bear watched the preparations from his position by the healing pool, his dark eyes missing nothing. When Emma approached him, ostensibly to check if he needed water, he studied her with unexpected intensity. "You bear weight of grief well," he said, accepting the water skin she offered. "Many would break under such burden." "There's been no time for breaking," Emma replied honestly. "Perhaps later, if we survive." The ghost of a smile touched the chief's weathered face. "Pragmatic. Good." He handed back the water skin. "My grandson respects you. This is not small thing." Emma glanced toward where Akacheta conferred with Wanbli about defensive positions. "He saved my life more than once." "He sees in you something familiar," White Bear said cryptically. "Wounded spirit that refuses to die." The chief adjusted his position, wincing slightly. "He was different before Reeves took his wife, laughed more, believed in peace between our peoples. And now? Now he burns with purpose that consumes him." White Bear's gaze was knowing. "As do you." Before Emma could respond, a low whistle from 2 birds at the tunnel entrance signaled approaching danger. Immediately the warriors took their positions. Akacheta and Wanbli at the front with rifles, Stonewalker and the others behind with bows, leaving only White Bear and Emma near the healing pools. "Get down!" Akacheta ordered sharply, motioning Emma behind a large boulder. "Wait for signal!" She obeyed, crouching with the revolver ready, heart pounding as she strained to hear the approaching enemies. For several long moments, only silence filled the tunnels, broken occasionally by the distant drip of water. Then a voice called out, slicing through the tense quiet. "I know you're in there, savages, and I know you've got the Thorn woman with you." Reeves's voice carried clearly through the tunnel, its measured calm more frightening than rage would have been. "Let's be reasonable about this. You've lost men." "We've lost men. Doesn't have to be a total bloodbath." No one responded. Emma watched Akacheta's face, saw the cool calculation in his eyes as he listened, determining distance, numbers, positions. "I'm after the woman, not your whole tribe," Reeves continued when no answer came. "Hand her over, and the rest of you can crawl back to whatever reservation you belong on. I'll even throw in these sacred bones you've been so desperate to recover." Stonewalker hissed something in Lakota that needed no translation, clearly a curse or expression of outrage at the desecration Reeves so casually referenced. "No deal, Reeves," Emma called out, ignoring Akacheta's warning glare. "You murdered my family. You're not walking away from that." A pause, then a throaty chuckle echoed through the tunnel. "There she is. Still got some spirit, I see." The humor drained from his voice when he spoke again. "Your father got what was coming to him, girl. You think that bounty poster just happened to find its way to us? Someone wanted Thomas Thorne dead. Someone's paying good money to make sure you join. Him. Who?" Emma demanded, shifting position to see the tunnel better, though Reeves remained out of sight. "Who paid you?" "That's not how this business works. We don't ask questions, just collect the bounty." His voice grew closer, indicating he was moving forward cautiously. "Though I admit, I'm curious why a newspaper man from Baltimore warranted such special attention. Must have uncovered something mighty interesting." Apache made a small gesture, and the warriors tensed, reading the signs Emma couldn't see. Their pursuers were advancing, trying to use conversation as cover for their approach. "One last chance," Reeves called. "Send out the woman and the rest of you live. Otherwise, we're coming in shooting and none of you leaves this mountain alive." "Many of you will die first," Apache responded, breaking his silence. "Is her life worth yours, bounty hunter?" "Worth $5,000, came the cold reply. "Good enough odds for me." The first shot came without warning, a muzzle flash. In the darkness of the tunnel, the bullet ricocheting off stone near Apache's position. He and Wambley returned fire immediately, their shots echoing deafeningly in the confined space. Chaos erupted as the bounty hunters charged forward, using the winding tunnel for cover as they advanced. Emma ducked lower behind her boulder as bullets chipped away at its edges. Through the flying stone dust, she caught glimpses of Reeves's men, Davis with his long rifle firing from a protected angle, Quinn darting between cover positions. Others she didn't recognize. The Lakota warriors fought with grim determination, making each shot count. 2 birds fell first, a bullet catching him in the chest as he attempted to retrieve a dropped weapon. Emma watched in horror as the young warrior crumpled, his eyes wide with shock before the light in them faded. Stone Walker took a shot to the arm, but continued firing his ancient rifle one-handed, his face a mask of concentration through the pain. White Bear, despite his wounded leg, had dragged himself to a position where he could use his bow, sending arrows into the narrowest part of the tunnel with deadly accuracy. Emma remained behind her cover, waiting for a clear shot, as Apache had instructed. When Quinn broke from his position, charging toward Wambley with a knife, she took aim and squeezed the trigger. The bullet caught the bounty hunter in the shoulder, spinning him around, but not stopping his advance. Wambley finished him with a tomahawk strike that dropped Quinn where he stood. "Behind you!" Apache's warning came just as Emma became aware of movement to her left. Mercer had somehow circled around, using a side passage to flank their position. The massive bounty hunter lunged for her, a Bowie knife gleaming in his hand. Emma fired instinctively, but her shot went wide in her panic. She scrambled backward, losing her footing on the slick stone and falling painfully onto her injured leg. Mercer grinned, sensing victory as he closed in. "Reeves wants you alive," he growled, "but he didn't say nothing about bringing you back unmarked." As he reached for her, Emma's hand closed around a jagged stone the size of her fist. She swung with all her strength, connecting with Mercer's temple with a sickening crack. Blood erupted from the wound, and the bounty hunter staggered, momentarily stunned. Emma didn't hesitate. She drove Stonewalker's knife into Mercer's chest, feeling the blade slip between ribs to find his heart. The bounty hunter's eyes widened in shock, his massive frame toppling forward. Emma rolled aside just in time to avoid being crushed beneath him. The knife remained embedded in Mercer's chest as he fell. Emma scrabbled for the revolver she'd dropped, fingers closing around it just as Davis appeared in the same passage Mercer had used. The sharpshooter took in the scene with a cold glance, raising his rifle toward Emma without hesitation. She brought up her revolver, knowing she was too slow, knowing the shot that would end her life was already on its way. An arrow whistled through the air, burying itself in Davis's throat before he could pull the trigger. The rifle discharged, harmlessly into the ceiling as he fell backward, hands clutching futilely at the shaft protruding from his neck. Emma turned to see White Bear lowering his bow, his dark eyes meeting hers across the chamber. He nodded once, a warrior's acknowledgement, before turning his attention back to the main battle. The fighting had intensified, Reeves himself now visible at the tunnel entrance, firing methodically with a Winchester repeater. One of the Lakota warriors fell, clutching a blooded thigh. Another, Stonewalker, had abandoned his rifle for a knife, engaged in close combat with one of the remaining bounty hunters. Apache fought like a man possessed, every movement precise and deadly. He had discarded his empty rifle for a tomahawk and knife, closing the distance to negate the bounty hunter's firearms advantage. Emma watched as he dispatched one of Reeves' men with a sweeping strike that opened the man's abdomen, then spun to block a knife thrust from another. Emma took aim at Reeves, squeezing the trigger carefully as her father had taught her. The bullet struck Stone inches from the bounty hunter leader's head, forcing him to duck back into cover. She fired again, keeping him pinned while Apache dealt with the remaining attackers. Movement from the side passage caught her attention, a figure, slipping in, taking advantage of the chaos. The Crow Scout Reeves employed, identifiable by his distinctive headband and mixture of native and white man's clothing. He carried a rifle in one hand, a knife in the other, his eyes scanning the battlefield before settling on White Bear. The wounded chief saw the threat too late. As he struggled to knock another arrow, the Crow Scout raised his rifle, taking careful aim at the defenseless elder. Emma's revolver clicked on an empty chamber. Desperate, she launched herself toward the scout, ignoring the pain that lanced through her injured leg. Her shoulder caught him in the midsection, driving him back several steps, disrupting his aim. The rifle discharged, the bullet striking rock instead of flesh. The Crow Scout recovered quickly, backhanding Emma with enough force to send her sprawling. Stars exploded across her vision as her head struck stone. Through the daze, she was dimly aware of the scout advancing on her, knife raised. "Interfering white woman," he snarled, his accent thicker than Apache's. "Not your fight." "Wrong," Emma managed, tasting blood where her lip had split. "It became my fight when Reeves murdered my family." Something flickered in the scout's eyes. Hesitation, perhaps, or recognition of a truth that transcended the boundaries between their worlds. In that moment of uncertainty, Emma kicked upward, catching him in the knee. As he stumbled, White Bear's arrow found his back, driving deep between his shoulder blades. The scout fell forward, knife clattering against stone. Emma rolled aside, struggling to her feet as the sounds of battle began to fade. Looking toward the main tunnel, she saw Apache standing over the body of the last bounty hunter, blood dripping from his tomahawk. Only Reeves remained, backed against the tunnel wall, his Winchester empty, a revolver in his hand. His cold eyes darted between the surviving Lakota warriors, calculating odds with the precision of a man accustomed to violence. "Seems I underestimated you savages," he said, mouth twisting in a humorless smile. "And you, Miss Thorne, didn't think you had killing in you." "You taught me well," Emma replied, retrieving Stonewalker's knife from Mercer's corpse. "You made murder my only option." Reeves's gaze shifted to Apache, who approached with the deadly grace of a predator. "I remember you," the bounty hunter said, recognition dawning. "The husband. Thought you died trying to rescue that pretty wife of yours." Apache's expression remained impassive, but Emma saw the rage that flared in his eyes at the mention of his wife. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Dead," Reeves replied bluntly. "Fever took her before we reached Denver. Shame, really. Could have gotten top dollar for her." The raw anguish that crossed Apache's face made Emma's heart constrict. The warrior had been searching for 5 years, holding on to hope that had just been casually extinguished by his enemy's words. Reeves used the momentary distraction to raise his revolver, aiming at Apache's chest. "Join her, then." Emma didn't think. She threw the knife with all her strength, the blade spinning end over end through the air. Her aim wasn't perfect. The knife struck Reeves's arm rather than his chest, but it was enough to spoil his shot. The bullet went wide, striking stone, as Akacheta closed the remaining distance. With terrible purpose, the Lakota warrior drove his tomahawk into Reeves' chest, the blade sinking deep. The bounty hunter's eyes widened in shock and pain, his revolver falling from suddenly nerveless fingers. "My wife's name was Singing Dove," Akacheta said, his voice low and tight with controlled fury. "Remember it in whatever hell awaits you." Reeves coughed, blood bubbling at his lips. His eyes found Emma over Akacheta's shoulder. "You think this ends it?" he managed, each word a struggle. "The men who paid me, they'll send others. Thomas Thorne's secrets. Too dangerous." "What secrets?" Emma demanded, stepping closer despite the gruesome scene. "Who paid you?" But Reeves's life was fading too quickly for answers. His final breath escaped in a rattling gasp, his eyes fixed on something none of them could see. Then he was gone, another body among the many that littered the sacred chamber. Silence fell, broken only by the steady drip of water and the labored breathing of the survivors. Of the 12 Lakota warriors who had attacked the bounty hunters' camp, only 5 remained standing. 2 birds, Night Runner, and 2 others lay dead. Stonewalker and another warrior were wounded but alive. Emma sank to her knees, the adrenaline that had sustained her ebbing away to leave trembling exhaustion in its wake. She had killed 2 men today, not in self-defense merely, but with deliberate intent. The knowledge settled over her like a shroud, necessary but heavy. Akacheta knelt beside her, his own wounds bleeding freely now that the fight was done. "It is finished," he said quietly, but Emma shook her head, remembering Reeves's final words. "No," she replied, "I think it's only beginning." The aftermath of battle hung heavy in the sacred chamber. The metallic scent of blood mingled with the mineral steam rising from the pools, creating an atmosphere both reverent and terrible. Emma helped Stonewalker tend to the wounded, her city-bred hands quickly adapting to the healer's instructions. Years of assisting her physician grandfather before his death had gifted her with rudimentary medical knowledge that proved invaluable now. White Bear, his leg wound properly cleaned and bound, maintained a stoic vigil over the fallen warriors. Though his face remained impassive, Emma glimpsed the cost of leadership in his eyes, each death a weight added to a burden he had carried for decades. Akacheta stood apart, staring into the depths of the largest pool, his shoulders rigid with grief. The confirmation of his wife's death had stolen something vital from him, leaving a hollowness that even victory couldn't fill. 5 years of searching, of hoping, extinguished by Reeves's casual cruelty. When the immediate needs of the living had been addressed, Akacheta organized a search of the bounty hunters' bodies. Emma joined him, kneeling beside Reeves' corpse with determination overriding revulsion. The bounty hunter leader had spoken of her father's secrets, dangerous knowledge that had warranted assassination. Perhaps something on his person might provide answers. "What are we looking for?" Akacheta asked, methodically checking Reeves's pockets. "Anything that might explain why my father was targeted," Emma replied, forcing herself to search the bloody vest. Letters, documents, names. Their grim task yielded little at first: ammunition, a crude map of the mountain, a handful of gold coins. Then, tucked inside Reeves's boot, Emma found a folded paper sealed with wax. Breaking the seal, she discovered a letter written in a precise, educated hand. Confirmation received of T. Thorne's elimination. Partial payment enclosed. Final sum upon verified disposal of remaining witness. She must not reach Denver. Too many questions already circulating about the Kansas arrangement. Contact W as planned upon completion. Emma read it twice, her hands trembling. "This is it. Proof that my father's death was arranged." She passed the letter to Akacheta. "But it's maddeningly vague," SW, the Kansas arrangement, what does it all mean? Akacheta studied the paper, his expression darkening. Names hidden to protect guilty, he observed. But paper is expensive. Only wealthy men write such notes. Wealthy men like railroad barons. Emma mused, memories surfacing of her father's last investigation before they fled Baltimore. He was looking into land seizures in Kansas territory, property taken from settlers through legal manipulation, then sold to the railroad companies for 10 times its value. And he found proof, enough to publish several articles condemning the practice, Emma confirmed. He received threats afterward. That's when he decided we should move west, start fresh in Oregon. Her throat tightened. I thought we'd left the danger behind. Men with power have long reach, Akacheta said grimly, and long memory. White Bear joined them, moving carefully to avoid putting weight on his injured leg. He examined the letter, then handed it back to Emma with a knowing look. Blood calls for blood, he said simply, but sometimes justice needs different weapons. Emma understood his meaning. Physical vengeance had been exacted against Reeves and his immediate accomplices, but the true architects of her family's murder remained untouched, protected by wealth and distance. I need to get to Denver, she decided, tucking the letter securely into her bodice. Find this W mentioned in the letter. Follow the trail to whoever arranged my father's death. Dangerous journey, White Bear cautioned. For lone woman, nearly impossible. I'm not afraid, Emma replied, though it wasn't entirely true. Fear remained her constant companion, but now it shared space with determination and a newfound strength forged in survival. No, Akacheta agreed, studying her face. Not afraid, but also not foolish, I hope. Denver is many days' travel through hostile country. Their conversation was interrupted by Wanbli, who had been assigned to keep watch at the tunnel entrance. The young warrior approached with uncharacteristic hesitation, his expression troubled. Riders approaching from North Passage, he reported. Many horses, not bounty hunters. White Bear exchanged a significant look with Akacheta. Cavalry, the chief suggested, perhaps following Reeves. Emma felt a flicker of hope. U.S. cavalry meant government authority, possibly a chance to document what had happened here, to begin building a case against those who had orchestrated her family's murder. How many? Akacheta asked Wanbli. 12, maybe 15, the young warrior replied, led by man in buckskin, not uniform. This detail caused both Akacheta and White Bear to tense. Not military then, but another potential threat. We are in no condition for another fight, White Bear said, gesturing to their diminished numbers and wounded. The North Passage has narrow places, Akacheta noted. We could collapse the tunnel, buy time to escape through southern routes. Emma considered another possibility. What if they're not enemies? If they were tracking Reeves too, they might be allies. Skepticism showed clearly on the warriors' faces. Experience had taught them to expect hostility rather than aid from strangers, particularly white strangers. Yet their situation offered few options. Wounded and reduced in number, another battle could mean annihilation. I will speak to them, Akacheta decided finally. Emma stays hidden with wounded. If I do not return within the hour, use Southern Passage to escape. Though White Bear clearly disliked the plan, he nodded his acceptance. Emma, however, stepped forward. I'm coming with you, she said firmly. When Akacheta began to object, she continued, if they're white men, my presence might prevent immediate hostility, and if they're connected to whoever sent Reeves, I want to see their faces. After a tense moment, Akacheta relented. Stay behind me, he instructed. First sign of trouble, run back to others. They moved cautiously through the tunnel that led northward, Wanbli following at a distance as backup. The passage twisted upward, growing gradually brighter as they approached what Emma assumed was another entrance to the cave system. Eventually, They reached a natural chamber where daylight filtered through a crack in the ceiling, illuminating a massive room filled with ancient stone formations. Voices echoed from a tunnel ahead. Men approaching, the jingle of spurs and weapons, accompanying their cautious advance. Apache motioned Emma to remain partially concealed behind a stalagmite, while he positioned himself where the light would reveal him clearly to the newcomers. The first figure to emerge into the chamber confirmed Bunbley's description: a tall man in buckskins rather than a military uniform, a battered cavalry hat pulled low over his eyes. A badge gleamed on his chest. U.S. Marshal, Emma realized with a surge of hope. The marshal halted, raising his hand to stop those behind him. His weathered face registered surprise at finding Apache standing calmly before him, but his hand remained conspicuously away from his holstered revolver. "Well now," he said, his voice carrying a slight southern drawl, "wasn't expecting a welcoming committee." "This is sacred ground," Apache replied evenly. "Why do you come here, Marshal?" The lawman studied Apache for a moment, seemingly taking the measure of the warrior before responding. "Name's Marshal James Calloway. Tracking a group of bounty hunters, or what passes for bounty hunters when actual murderers take up the trade." He glanced around the chamber. "Clayton Reeves and his men. Trail led here. Reeves is dead," Apache stated. "His men also, Calloway's." Eyebrows rose slightly. "That's so. Mind if I verify that for myself? Got quite a list of charges waiting for Reeves if he's still breathing." Emma stepped from her hiding place, deciding the time for caution had passed. The marshal's hand twitched toward his gun before settling again at the sight of a white woman. "Mr. Reeves and his men murdered my family at Devil's Canyon," Emma said, her voice steady despite the painful memory. "Then kept me prisoner for weeks. The evidence of their crimes is back there, Marshal, including a letter proving that my father's death was arranged by powerful men who feared what he knew." Calloway regarded her with unveiled interest. "Would you be Emma Thorne, by any chance? Daughter of Thomas Thorne, the Baltimore editor?" Surprise and wariness flashed through Emma. "How do you know my name?" "Been looking for you and your family," Calloway explained. "Got a telegram from a Judge Harrington in Baltimore about 6 weeks back. Said Thomas Thorne and family might be in danger traveling west. Asked me to keep an eye out." Regret crossed his weathered features. "Seems I was. Too late." "Judge Harrington," Emma repeated, momentarily stunned. "He was my father's friend. They worked together on several cases exposing corruption. The judge was concerned when he learned about the bounty on your father," Calloway continued. "Suspected it wasn't legitimate. I've been trailing Reeves for nearly a month, but the devil was slippery." He glanced at Apache with newfound respect. "Until he ran into you folks, apparently. They took something sacred from our people," Apache explained, his posture relaxing slightly as he assessed the marshal as a potential ally rather than threat. "We came for justice. Found Emma prisoner in their camp." Calloway nodded thoughtfully. "Guess we'd better see what's left of Reeves then. And I'd like to take a look at that letter you mentioned, Miss Thorne." He turned to call over his shoulder. "Jenkins, Thomas, come with me. The rest of you hold position here." 2 deputies joined them as they led Calloway back through the tunnel, toward the sacred pools. Emma studied the marshal as they walked, searching for signs of deception or ulterior motives. He moved with the confident ease of a man comfortable with both wilderness and violence, yet something in his manner suggested integrity, a quality she had feared extinct after her family's murder. When they reached the main chamber, Calloway surveyed the aftermath of battle with professional detachment. He examined Reeves' body without comment, then those of the other bounty hunters, occasionally nodding in recognition. Davis, Quinn, Mercer, he identified each corpse. The worst of a bad lot, been wanted in 3 territories. He glanced at the fallen Lakota warriors with what appeared to be genuine regret. "Your people paid a heavy price. Justice often does. White Bear responded from where he sat near the healing pools, his dignity undiminished by his wound. Emma retrieved the letter from her bodice and handed it to Calloway. This was hidden in Reeves' boot. It mentions my father's elimination and refers to me as a witness who must not reach Denver. The marshal read it carefully, his expression darkening. Initials only, but clear enough intent. He folded the paper and returned it to Emma. This is important evidence, Miss Thorne, but it won't be enough on its own to bring down whoever ordered your father's death. These types of men are careful to maintain distance from their dirty work. Then, what will be enough? Emma asked, frustration edging her tone. My entire family was slaughtered. Someone must answer for that. Information, Calloway replied simply. Whatever your father discovered about this Kansas arrangement, that's what got him killed. If we can find his notes, his evidence, all our belongings were destroyed in the attack, Emma said, heart sinking. The wagon was burned. Perhaps not everything, Akecheta interjected. He exchanged a look with White Bear, who nodded reluctant permission. When we found massacre site, searching for who took our sacred objects, we discovered hidden compartment in wagon remains. Metal box buried under dirt where fire had not reached. We took it, thinking it might identify owners. Hope flared in Emma's chest. A metal strongbox. My father kept his most important documents in such a container. Where is it now? At our winter camp, Akecheta replied. 3 days' journey north. Calloway absorbed this information with a thoughtful nod. I'd say our paths are aligned then. I'm tasked with investigating corruption in the territorial land offices, including suspicious dealings in Kansas. He looked between Emma and Akecheta. I could use witnesses who've seen firsthand what these men are willing to do to protect their interests. You propose alliance? White Bear asked, his tone suggesting such a thing was unprecedented. I propose justice, Calloway corrected, the legal kind backed by federal courts. Hard evidence that can't be dismissed or buried. He turned to Emma. I can offer you protection, Miss Thorne, a chance to testify against the men who ordered your family's death. And my people? Akecheta asked pointedly. What do you offer? Them? The marshal didn't flinch from the challenging question. I can't change how the government treats the Lakota. That's beyond my power. His honesty was refreshing, if painful. But I can ensure that the desecration of your burial grounds is documented as a crime, that Reeves and his men are recorded as the murderers they were, not heroes on the frontier. It's not enough, but it's what I can do. White Bear and Akecheta conferred briefly in Lakota, their low voices carrying the weight of a decision that would affect their entire band. Finally, Akecheta turned back to Calloway. We will take you to winter camp, he stated, show you the metal box. After that, we decide whether to trust your justice. Calloway accepted this conditional alliance with a nod. Fair enough. The hours that followed brought a strange cooperation between groups that traditionally viewed each other with suspicion or outright hostility. Calloway's deputies helped tend to the wounded Lakota warriors while the native healers shared their knowledge of plants that could ease pain and prevent infection. The bodies of the fallen were prepared according to their respective traditions. The Lakota warriors wrapped in hides for return to their people. The bounty hunters documented by Calloway's men for official records before burial in shallow graves. Emma found herself in an unexpected role as bridge between these different worlds. Her weeks of captivity had taught her to value strength and survival skills regardless of their source. Now, watching Stone Walker demonstrate poultice preparation to a curious deputy or seeing Wanbley exchange tracking techniques with one of Calloway's scouts, she glimpsed possibilities that existed outside the rigid divisions of race and culture. As night fell, Emma sought out Akecheta, finding him at the edge of the sacred pools where the falls created a constant, soothing rhythm. He sat motionless, his profile carved in shadow and firelight, grief an almost tangible presence around him. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said quietly, settling beside him. "To hope for so long only to learn." "Hope is double blade," he replied after a moment. "Keeps heart beating when body wants to surrender, but makes truth cut deeper when it finally comes." He trailed his fingers through the glowing water. "Singing Dove believed our peoples could live together in peace. She taught English to our children, learned medicine from white doctor who visited reservation." "She sounds remarkable," Emma said softly. She was. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "She would approve of what happens here tonight, enemies becoming allies, at least for a time." His expression grew solemn again, but would also warn that trust must be earned, not given freely. "Do you think Calloway can be trusted?" Akecheta considered this. "His eyes do not shift when he speaks. He treats my people with respect, not false words." He glanced toward where the marshal conferred with White Bear. "But he serves government that has broken every promise made to Lakota. So we watch, we wait, we judge by actions, not words." Emma nodded, understanding the caution born of generations of betrayal. "My father would have said the same. He believed in the law, in justice, but knew how easily both could be corrupted by powerful interests." "Your father's metal box," Akecheta said, changing direction. "You believe it contains proof of why he was killed?" "I hope so," Emma replied. "He was investigating land fraud in Kansas, government officials and railroad companies conspiring to cheat settlers and native tribes alike. If his evidence is intact," she let the implications hang between them, "then perhaps his death buys justice after all." Akecheta finished. "Different kind of immortality." They sat in companionable silence for a time, the gentle splash of the falls filling the space between words. Finally, Emma gave voice to the question that had been forming since the battle ended. "What will you do now, after we reach your winter camp?" Akecheta stared into the glowing depths of the pool, as if seeking answers in its mysterious light. "For 5 winters, finding Singing Dove was my only purpose. Now," he exhaled slowly, "now I must find new path." "You could come to Denver," Emma suggested. "Help me and Calloway build the case against whoever arranged my father's murder. Your testimony about Reeves and his men, the slave-trading operation, it could make a difference. White courts seldom value Indian words," he pointed out, though without bitterness, merely stating a reality they both recognized. "Then we change that," Emma said, newfound determination coloring her voice. "One case at a time, one truth at a time." Akecheta studied her face in the flickering light, something like admiration kindling in his dark eyes. "You have warrior spirit, Emma Thorne. Different weapon than knife or gun, but no less powerful." "I wasn't always this person," she admitted. "Before Devil's Canyon, I was a proper Boston-educated lady who worried about propriety and social standing. Now?" She looked down at her hands, calloused from weeks of captivity and combat. "Now I understand what truly matters. Survival changes us," Akecheta agreed. "Makes us see world as it is, not as we wish it to be." He reached out, his fingers brushing her hand briefly. "But does not have to make us hard inside. Strength without compassion becomes like Reeves, empty victory." The wisdom in his words resonated deeply. Emma had felt the pull toward bitterness, toward allowing hate to consume her purpose. Yet here, in this sacred place, surrounded by people who had suffered their own losses yet retained their humanity, she recognized the choice before her. "Tomorrow we begin journey to winter camp," Akecheta said, rising gracefully despite his wound. "Should rest while you can." Emma nodded suddenly, aware of her own exhaustion. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." "Pilamaya," he replied, teaching her the Lakota word for gratitude. Sleep well, Emma Thorne. 3 days later, as dawn broke over the rolling plains, Emma stood at the edge of the Lakota winter camp. Tidy lodges arranged in a great circle spread. Before her, smoke rising from morning fires as women prepared food and children emerged, sleepy-eyed from warm shelters. Behind her, Marshal Calloway and his deputies maintained a respectful distance, allowing Akacheta and the returning warriors to enter their home with dignity despite their wounds and diminished numbers. The arrival of wounded warriors accompanying white strangers created an immediate stir. Families rushed forward, joy at seeing loved ones return quickly tempered by grief for those who hadn't. The bodies of the fallen, carried with reverence on travois, dragged by patient horses, were received with wails of mourning that pierced Emma's heart. White Bear, his leg wound healing but still requiring assistance to walk, was escorted to a large central lodge by several elders. Though Emma couldn't understand their words, the respect accorded to the chief was evident in every gesture, every inclined head. Akacheta guided Emma through the camp, past curious eyes and whispered conversations. Children darted forward to stare at her before being called back by watchful mothers. She felt conspicuously foreign in this place, yet not unwelcome, merely a novelty to be assessed. They wonder why white woman comes with our warriors, Akacheta explained, as they approached a smaller lodge near the camp's edge. Word will spread of what happened at Sacred Pools. By nightfall, all will know your story. Inside the lodge, illuminated by morning light filtering through the smoke hole above, Emma found a surprising degree of comfort. Soft hides covered the packed earth floor, a small fire burned in the central pit, and various household items were arranged with meticulous care. Around the circular space, my home, Akacheta said simply, though something in his tone suggested painful memories associated with the word. Empty spaces where a woman's possessions should have been. Singing Dove's absence was palpable in the spare furnishings, the practical arrangement that lacked a woman's touch. He retrieved a metal box from beneath a pile of winter furs, her father's strongbox, its surface scorched by fire, but the lock intact. Emma ran her fingers over the familiar container, throat tightening with emotion. The key was on a chain around my father's neck, she said softly. Reeves probably took it after. Akacheta produced a small leather pouch. Found among Reeves' possessions, he explained, tipping its contents into his palm. A simple brass key alongside a gold wedding band Emma recognized as her mother's. Hands trembling, Emma inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a reluctant click, the mechanism protesting after exposure to fire and elements. Inside, she found exactly what she'd hoped for. Her father's journals, maps of Kansas territory with careful notations, and most importantly, a packet of letters documenting correspondence between land office officials and railroad executives. This is it, she whispered, scanning the contents with growing excitement. Names, dates, specific parcels of land illegally seized. And this, she held up a particular document with a government seal. A forged treaty with the Pawnee used to justify taking their hunting grounds for the railroad. Calloway, who had joined them by invitation, examined the papers with professional interest. This is compelling evidence, Miss Thorne. With your testimony and these documents, we have a foundation for a federal case. Will it be enough? Emma asked, the weight of her family's sacrifice hanging on the answer. To start turning wheels. Of justice, yes, the marshal replied honestly. Where those wheels stop, how high this corruption reaches, that remains to be seen. He gathered the papers carefully, but it's more than we had yesterday, and sometimes that's how justice works, one step at a time. White Bear summoned them to council that evening, the elders gathering to hear the full account of what had transpired at the Sacred Pools. Emma sat beside Akacheta as he narrated their journey in Lakota, occasionally pausing to allow her to add details from her perspective, which he translated for the assembly. The elders listened in solemn silence, their weathered faces revealing little of their thoughts. When the tale was complete, including Calloway's proposition to pursue legal justice against those who had orchestrated Thomas Thorne's murder, White Bear opened the matter for council discussion. Opinions varied widely. Some elders viewed any cooperation with white authority as dangerous folly, citing generations of broken promises. Others saw strategic value in documenting the crimes committed against both Emma's family and their sacred burial grounds. The debate continued long into the night, respectful but impassioned. Finally, White Bear raised his hand for silence. His decision, when it came, reflected both caution and pragmatism. "Akacheta will accompany the woman and the marshal to Denver," he announced. "We'll bear witness to crimes against our dead and against her family. We'll ensure our story is told." Truly, his dark eyes moved to Emma. "Our paths crossed in blood and fire. Perhaps Great Spirit has purpose in this meeting of different worlds." The council concluded with ceremonial sharing of a pipe, sealing the decision in tradition. As the elders dispersed to their lodges, Emma found herself standing under a vast canopy of stars, the plains stretching endlessly around the circle of Lakota homes. Akacheta joined her, his presence a now familiar comfort. "We leave for Denver when sun rises," he said. "Journey of many days through changing lands." "Are you certain about coming with us?" Emma asked. "Your people need you here, especially with White Bear wounded." "My grandfather is stronger than he appears," Akacheta replied with the ghost of a smile. "And I have promised to keep." At her questioning look he continued, "To Singing Dove. She believed justice possible between our peoples, even when I doubted. Perhaps this is way to honor her memory." Emma nodded, understanding the power of promises to the dead. She too carried such bonds, oaths sworn silently over the graves of her parents and brother. "What happens in Denver?" she said softly. "It won't bring them back. Won't erase what happened." "No," Akacheta agreed. "Dead remain dead. Pain remains pain." He looked toward the endless horizon, where the first hint of dawn would eventually appear. "But new day comes regardless. Choice is what we carry into it." Emma Thorne, sole survivor of the Devil's Canyon massacre, felt something unfamiliar unfurl within her chest. Not happiness precisely, but something adjacent to it. Purpose, connection, the knowledge that even in a world capable of unspeakable cruelty, unlikely allies could emerge from the darkness. Tomorrow they would ride toward Denver, toward an uncertain confrontation with powerful men who believed themselves beyond accountability. The path would be dangerous, the outcome far from guaranteed. Yet for the first time since watching her family fall to bounty hunters' bullets, Emma felt the weight of solitary survival lift slightly. Beside her, Akacheta traced a constellation, with his finger teaching her its Lakota name and story. Above them, the same stars that had witnessed countless human struggles continued their eternal procession, indifferent to the boundaries and conflicts of those who gazed upward. Not an ending, Emma realized, but a beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.